Welcome back, everyone. We are How About This. For today's video, we thought it would be fun to read some scary stories that we found on the internet. But before we start, please be sure to give us a like and subscribe to keep up with our creepy content. We would also love it if you would leave a comment telling us your favorite scary stories. We would love to do more videos like this in the future. And now, let's read some scary stories.
In the quiet countryside of the United States, the nighttime is filled with beautiful stars and the calming sounds of crickets chirping in the grass. However, nighttime doesn't always bring such serene settings. Sometimes they harbor something more sinister. Black-eyed children have become something of a modern urban legend, a staple amongst tabloids since the 1980s. However, the first credible account surfaced in 1996. These entities almost always appear in groups of 2 or 3. They will also always be in the age range of 6 to 16. Accounts state that they will approach the door or car of an unsuspecting person or persons in the dead of night with no respect to location. Most encounters happen in small towns in the middle of nowhere, but it's not unheard of for encounters to happen in any place from a suburban street to apartment complexes. When their victims go to talk to them, they are filled with an overwhelming sense of dread and fear, while also an inexplicable desire to let them in. When spoken to, the children will hide their eyes by looking away and ask to step inside, either to use a phone or to wait for help to arrive. Most people's desire to let them in are defeated by their feelings of terror. When their victim notices their eyes, they will see voids of pure black with no discernible retina or iris. When this happens, the children become aggressive and begin to demand to come in, shouting and banging on the doors and windows, even windows on second and higher floors. This is the story of the first credible encounter with black-eyed children. This is the story of Brian Bethel. It was a warm night in the summer of 1996. Brian had stopped his car in the light of a marquee of a movie theater to write out a check for his internet bill. Whilst writing, he heard a knocking on his window. Startled by the sudden noise, he looked up to see 2 boys with their hoods up, silhouetted against the hard light of the marquee. Brian cracked his window, anticipating a plea for some money, when he was suddenly filled to the brim with terror, down to his very soul, and he had no idea why. A conversation began between Brian and one of the boys. The boy was somewhat suave and spoke with confidence, and Brian could make out that his hair was curly and his skin was olive in color. The other boy, who had red hair, was pale as the driven snow and was splattered in freckles. He remained quiet. The spokesperson of the duo told Brian that they had come wanting to see the Mortal Kombat movie, but had forgotten their money at their mother's home. The fear in him sunk even deeper when they asked, "Could you give us a ride?" Brian's rational mind said that this was likely enough, but he couldn't get past the soul-racking fear that continued to grow in him. He looked at the marquee and then the clock in his car and realized that the last showing of Mortal Kombat of the night had already started, and it would be over by the time he had gotten them back to the theater. While Brian was thinking of this, his ears were bombarded with statements like, "It won't be long. We're just 2 little kids, and we don't have a gun or anything." Brian felt unnerved by this last statement. It was then that he noticed his hand was going for the door to open it. He yanked it back violently, and in the short time, he broke the gaze of the boy and his mind exploded in an all-consuming flurry of pure terror. Both boys stared at him with black eyes, an emptiness in the eyes that one sees as, quote, on aliens or bargain basement vampires on late-night television. Soulless orbs like 2 great swaths of starless night. He did everything he could to keep his composure in front of the 2 entities while fear threatened to overwhelm him from the inside out. He apologized and made up any excuse he could to escape. He threw the car in reverse and rolled up the window. The boy, having noticed the fear in Brian, began to bang on the window while shouting, "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in!" Brian sped out of the parking lot, a palpable darkness hanging over him at this experience. No one knows what these children are, where they came from, and what their intentions are. Theories range from aliens to demons to children of the infamous Men in Black. But to this day, no answers have been found, so the next time you hear a knock at the door in the middle of the night, think twice before you answer it.
What were his intentions? So, this happened about 2 years ago, and the story just gets creepier and creepier. Just for reference, I live on a farm, so I have quite a bit of land. There are actually 3 living places on my land, 2 houses and a trailer. Also, there is a barn, chicken coop, shed, and a garage. We had recently put in sliding glass doors because we had been renovating our house. In my house, 4 people lived there. Me, my mom, my grandmother, and my aunt. In the other house, my aunt and uncle. And in the trailer, my cousin and her husband. At the time, we had 7 dogs, so how this person pulled this off, I have no idea. On this night, I had my best friend over, and we went to sleep around 1 in the morning. My aunt apparently got up around 2 to let her dog out. She came out to the kitchen to grab some food and realized that the back door was open. I guess she thought that someone had went outside to smoke and forgot to close it. She went over and shut it, and that's when she realized that she could have shut someone inside the house with us. She immediately ran to my mom's room, woke her up, and told her what was happening. My mother sprung out of bed, and they walked together to the kitchen and grabbed a butcher knife. My mother remembered that my friend and I were upstairs, so she told my aunt to go and check on us. So, she also grabbed a knife and went upstairs. My friend woke up when she walked in, but I didn't. My aunt asked her if we had gone outside, and my friend said that we haven't left the room all night. My aunt said okay, and turned and walked back downstairs. My friend then shook me awake and told me what my aunt had done. I looked at the time on my phone and saw that it was almost 3 in the morning. The next time my door opens, a police officer walks in. Now my friend and I are getting a little scared. They ask us the same questions that my aunt asked. My friend and I get up and walk out of the room to hear what the police are saying. Another officer comes out of the basement and says, "Whoever was in your house escaped out of the basement." My grandmother then asks the officer if he is sure that there is no one in the basement, because it was a very easy place to hide in. Both officers then go downstairs and look around to make sure no one is there. They don't find anything, and nothing is missing from our house. This is odd because right next to the door where the person entered was my laptop. They exited through the basement, and there was a bunch of stuff down there that they could have easily grabbed while getting out of the house. Here's the creepy part. The trailer that my cousin lives in is right behind our house. Her husband works second shift, and he gets home pretty late sometimes. One night she stayed up, and through her kitchen window, she saw a man standing out there. Just standing. She then called her husband and asked why he wasn't coming inside, to which he responded, "I'm now just getting in my car." Also, there were no tire tracks leading out or into my driveway, which the cops pointed out that it could have been one of our neighbors. So, whoever this guy was who broke into my house, we don't know what he wanted, and if he had been there for a long time, had he been watching us, and for how long.
Throughout history, mysterious entities of pure darkness and shadow have appeared in dreams and waking reality of thousands of people. A sense of maliciousness often accompanies these spirits as they stare at the poor souls who encounter them. Brought to the public eye by popular paranormal radio show Coast to Coast AM, people began to speak out about these encounters, and many have a disturbing similarity. A wide-brimmed hat, a long trench coat, and a paralyzing sense of pure evil. The Hat Man is an entity who is most commonly seen in bouts of sleep paralysis, where he holds his paralyzed victims while filling them with a heart-rending fear. He, however, is not bound by sleep. Users of Ouija boards and alleged alien abductees have also reported encountering this being. This is the story of one encounter posted to Reddit by user Slista. This is the tale of the Hat Man. I call him Nightmare but it wasn't a dream. When I was 4 years old, I was laying in bed, and I saw light coming through the window above my bed. The window was facing the backyard, and I thought it was weird that there was a street light in my backyard. I stood up on my bed and looked out the window, and there it was. He must have been 7 feet tall, wearing a trench coat and a big brimmed hat. I couldn't see any details because he was pure black, and the light coming from up above behind him made it harder to see. Even though I couldn't see his face, I could feel him staring at me and communicating with me in my mind. I don't know what was being said, but I had this feeling where my adrenaline was being suppressed, and I was so calm but I didn't want to be. My dog that always slept in my bed with me ran and hid under the bed. From that night forward, my dog would only sleep under the bed. When I was finally able to, I broke out of whatever was happening and ran to my mom in the living room. I told her what was happening and she went to bed with me. The next morning, my brother called my mom. We were living in Texas and my brother was 23 or 24 years old at the time and was living in Minnesota. He asked if everyone was okay. I'd almost never talked to or seen my brother. At that point, I didn't really know him. He told us that last night he was taken from his place and he was in a room that looked like it was completely stainless steel and there was no lights, but the walls were emitting light. He said there was a metal bench and my mom and sister, who was about 19 years old and lived up the street from me, was there and crying hysterically. The Hat Man was in the room and another being was doing something to my mom and causing her pain. My brother stood up and the Hat Man grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. My brother then proceeded to stick his thumb in the Hat Man's eye, which he described as kind of a big black insectoid kind of eye, but it seemed more like a contact. And then two other beings came in the room and they had some sort of metallic pipe in their hands. The Hat Man put my brother down and the other beings stabbed one of the metal pipes into his side and shocked him, and he lost consciousness. He later woke up in his duplex. Later that day, my brother stopped by my grandma's apartment and she was pissed at my uncle that was living with her at the time because he came home drunk and broke her coffee table. He told her that he was laying on that couch and saw the Hat Man standing at the end of the couch. My uncle got up and went to attack it, and the Hat Man grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up and dropped him on the coffee table and disappeared. My uncle had bruises all the way around his neck and it looked like Andre the Giant choked him out. This was the most terrifying moment of my life. And as I write this, I feel sick to my stomach and like I'm crawling out of my skin. Though he is called the Hat Man by many, I've always referred to him as Nightmare because that's how I feel about him. Who is this being? Who is the Hat Man? Is he a demon? An extra-dimensional entity? An alien of some sort? It's likely we'll never know. The next time you sleep in a dark room and you see a shadow, pray that it's not the Hat Man.
Late Night Mystery. This is a true story, but it requires a few details before we dig in. Years ago, maybe in 2013 or 2014, I was hanging out with my little cousins. They didn't go out a lot at that time, so normally I'd like to get them out of their house and kind of spoil them. Our favorite spot to eat was always Outback Steakhouse. The bloomin' onions and cheese fries, you can't beat it. Then we would sometimes go to the mall and shop for clothes or some little gadgets, maybe sometimes a movie afterwards. And then that was it for the night. One evening in particular, we remained in our hometown instead of traveling a few towns over that actually had more options for restaurants. I think it was storming, so we stayed in town. We ended up going to my friend's house. We arrived and it was just him and his sister. His sister lived with him at the time, while she was in college. After a few minutes, we ended up all going out to get a late night snack and coffee at the nearby 24-hour diner. We came back and I had to go to the bathroom. As I'm coming out of the bathroom, I have to walk through the kitchen to get back to the living room, where everyone was gathered. I look at the refrigerator door, and I see a picture. It was a drawing made in crayon. Ironically enough, I said, "What the heck is this?" My friend and my little cousins came into the kitchen, and immediately, my youngest cousin says, "Hey, it's Slender Man." I have no clue who that is. "Who?" I responded. "It's a monster that kidnaps children," my youngest cousin replied. "My little brother drew it when he was here last time and I thought it was cool, so I put it on my refrigerator, my friend says. So, we all finally migrate back to the living room. My friend has a large blanket tacked to the wall above the threshold that connects the kitchen to the living room, only to conserve the cool air in the living room, because he had a window unit and no air ducts running through the house. We are all sitting in the living room and reading up on this Slender Man character. My friend and his sister were on their laptops. Myself and my oldest cousin were on our phones looking up the stories and myths. Needless to say, there was some interesting stories on the character. I didn't, of course, believe in any of this, and I still don't. This went on for maybe another half hour until my cousins started getting a little rowdy, so I told my friend I was going to drop them off at their house and then come back. This was around 11 p.m. I got back to my friend's house at around 11:40, and when I walked in, my friend is still at his desk in the living room looking at the Slender Man stories, and his sister is on the couch with her laptop and a cup of coffee next to her. I sit in the chair that's next to my friend's bedroom door. This bedroom door is also closed and happens to open into the living room rather than into the bedroom. This is for future reference. We find stories and read them aloud. Obviously, some are a bit far-fetched, and some are genuinely scary. Good campfire stories, and I love a good story. I always have, so I keep trying to find different ones about this creature. This goes on for maybe another 30 minutes, and then something happens that we didn't expect. We're all sitting quietly and reading to ourselves at this point. Then, we hear a loud thud in the kitchen. We all look at each other, and then look to the blanket that covers the threshold to the kitchen. We then looked around, and his cat is in the room with us, sitting behind his desk. So we knew it wasn't the cat. Then we hear it again, and then again, and then again. Like someone is stomping around in the kitchen. The steps are slow, with maybe a second or two in between. And these are heavy steps, maybe a cliche-sounding step. That's the only way I know how to describe them. And then it stops. We look around at each other, and we don't say a word. And then we hear it in my friend's bedroom. We are all staring at his bedroom door. Since there's not much else we can do, my phone is now on my lap, and my friend is turned around in his desk chair, listening just as closely as I was. The stepping stops again. A few seconds go by, and we think that's the end of it. His bedroom door handle then starts to move, and the door begins to open. All I'm able to see is the door slowly opening. Not a sound was made. His sister then screams so loud that the dogs from across the street begin to bark. She screams and dives to the end of the couch that is farthest from the door. Her laptop goes falling to the floor, and her hot coffee goes everywhere. The door hits the chair that I'm sitting in, and I'm waiting for something else to happen. Both myself and my friend are in shock at this point, but we immediately stand up. He looks over at his samurai sword set that he has mounted to the wall and pulls them down, and then he hands one to me. I mean, we don't believe in ghosts, but a weapon is a weapon, whether it's for decoration or not. We then proceed to patrol through his house. There was nothing in his bedroom, nothing in the second bedroom, and nothing in the kitchen or bathroom. We meet back in the kitchen and are left with no answers on what just happened. We come back to the living room to check on his sister. Her face is red, tears being patted away from her cheeks, and she's trying to clean up the coffee that was spilt. "What did you see?" we asked his sister. She shook her head and took her glasses off. "I don't know. I was scared." I get the laptop off the floor and help wipe it off, since there was coffee on it. My friend places the swords back on the wall and then turns to us. We both ask again if she's okay. She responds that she's okay, but insists that we stop looking up stories about Slender Man. We agreed, and we never looked up horror stories when we were all together again. That particular friend and myself aren't close anymore, and he hasn't lived in that house for the past 3 years. But for years we would always reference that story, and it always managed to give us chills. He later admitted that at first he thought my cousins were in the house and were stomping around. I laughed and explained that they weren't. This of course did not help his tension with living in that house. Now, I don't believe in ghosts, monsters, or aliens, but I do believe that the human imagination is a very powerful tool when it comes to telling a story, and if we believe enough in something, then surely anything can become flesh. Whether this is just an old house setting in on a warm night, or just Something else? We'll never know, but at least we got a good story out of this evening.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more of the creepy content that we all know that you love. Please leave a comment below if you have a creepy story or an urban legend that you would like us to talk about. Until next time, we are How About This. Stay creepy, friends.